Today's episode is brought to you by the Vegas Bear Guys and 2T Fitness.
Everything sequel contains explicit language. And why the fudge not, you melon farmer?
Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast. This is the Final Destination edition. My name is Michael Shantz. I am from the How Dare You Awards. With me is America's treasure, Tom Stewart from Lonesome Whistle Productions. Say hi, Tom.
Oh, Mom, not tampons.
I have a note in my notes that says, worst piece of shit mom ever.
Yeah, well, she is. However, that does kind of continue something that I don't think we talked about in the last movies, but definitely in 2, possibly in 3. The relationships between parents and children in this series are way too open.
Right, yeah.
In Final Destination 2, there's a kid who makes a joke to his mom about a dentist sexually assaulting him.
Right.
And then there's this when they're getting on the road trip at the beginning of the movie, one of the teenage girl's friends is joking to her dad that they're all going to go off and have sex.
And have sex, right.
And even if that was there as the possibility of a joke, I would be like, fuck that, you are not getting in that car.
Exactly.
Go to your room right now.
Trip canceled.
So this movie's an outlier in a lot of ways, but it's on the money when it comes to this far too sexually transparent relationships between parents and children.
Absolutely. And, well, I'll save it. Just speaking to the moment about the tampons, because this mom, listeners, is stuffing tampons into kids' ears because they're at a noisy NASCAR race.
Right.
And so, like, if there's nothing else in your purse and you're worried about your kids getting damaged eardrums,
yeah,
all right, you stuff some tampons, rip them in half and stuff them in there. But what I take objection to is she stares at them, points at them, and laughs at them when the tampons are hanging out of their ears. And that's what makes her a piece of shit.
Yeah. Well, and we've not even seen the worst of her parenting.
No, yeah.
Later on, she ditches her kids for a kind of spa day,
right,
and jeopardizes.
She says
jeopardizes everyone's life in the salon.
Yeah, through
exactly. Her bad parenting.
Well, of course, listeners, we are now talking about The Final Destination. A movie that was not the final destination in the series. A 2009 film directed by David R. Ellis, who is back once again, Tom, from Final Destination 2. We spoke on that podcast, of course, about how he directed Cellular and Snakes on a Plane and other delightful comedies. And we spoke at length in the Final Destination 2 podcast about what a comic genius he is.
Yeah.
And, James Wong comes back in number 3. It kind of says, we're putting a stop to that shit.
Yes, very much.
But David R. Ellis says, oh, no, my friend. He comes back for 4, or The Final Destination, rather. And he does it again, but to me, far less successfully than in number 2.
Yeah, this is... I got it was disappointing to me, having made the argument that he was in complete control of Final Destination 2 as a comedy.
Yeah.
Because I see aspects of that here, but the whole thing is kind of muddied, and we'll talk about what might be holding them back. I think 3D's got a lot to do with it.
Yes.
But something here is not quite clicking in the same way.
Well, what's...
Despite the fact that, very early on in the movie, an anvil falls on someone, and it makes a Looney Tunes cartoon sound effect.
Yes.
So, I was enthusiastic at that point, and then the rest of the movie was a big letdown.
I was so enthusiastic at first. Well, again, though, speaking to what I think, talked about in our introduction to the series, we talked about how all of these movies are successful, though. This movie had a budget of $40 million, made 66.4 in the USA, cumulatively in the world, $186.1 million. I mean, another money grab, sacks of money with dollar signs on it.
Yeah, and this one doesn't. The success of this one doesn't surprise me so much. I feel like it is a movie that is trying to capitalize on every leisure trend of the moment.
Yeah, totally.
It's made in 3D.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a lot of terrible CGI.
Right.
It begins
terrible CGI in 3D.
Yes, it begins in at a race car track, and the music is predominantly death metal. So just think
Right.
of like all the most awful aspects of this year in history.
Yeah.
This movie speaks to all of them.
To all of them.
Yeah.
As though it's what the audience wants, which is the funniest thing to me,
I believe in a previous podcast I've called this movie hick fodder, and maybe that was a little that was a little ungenerous, but
but probably accurate.
Yeah, pandering for sure.
Yes. So, well, let's start from the top, because this one takes place, like you said, at the NASCAR race car track.
Yeah.
Which is a bit of a departure for the series. They all usually involve, and this still involves transportation, but it's for your viewing pleasure. Usually everybody is riding something they have to get off of.
Right.
In all the other sequels. And in this one, they're passive participants watching. So did that work for you even? Or...
It's semi-worked for me. Actually, we both prefer... This is both of our least favorite.
Yes, right.
And I think we both agreed that Final Destination 5 is our second favorite.
Yeah.
And yet...
this one is worse than the others for me by a country mile.
Yeah, I agree. However, in terms of the opening set piece, I think this movie has already got the edge on 5, which begins with a business retreat. So it's more exciting than that. But
not the accidents itself, though. I don't know.
I completely, and I think that the big problem that I have is, if you're going to go to this trouble of staging, a giant car crash, have all this stunt work, why would you then drown it in bad CGI?
Right.
In the way that they do here. I think that, to me, is the point at which, all that great capital that Final Destination 3 builds up purely by staging the action correctly,
right,
is kind of missing here for me.
Well, and not just that, because not just from, say, a bad CGI standpoint, but for me also from a not following the physics of the world standpoint as well, because these characters are watching a NASCAR race.
Yes.
And we have a different blonde asshole from the previous blonde assholes,
right,
that we've talked about in the previous movies and in the last summer editions.
Yeah, there was a last summer. There was a blonde, a common denominator
asshole, right?
Yes, that's right.
But and common denominator as the actor as well, because the same actor was in both series.
Yeah.
But we have a new blonde asshole who is there only to watch car crashes. That's why he comes to these things. I also find it remarkable, by the way, that he's bet $500 somehow on this race, which is why he doesn't want to leave. And all of these things add up to just shitty ideas and shitty filmmaking.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Even in the worst NASCAR car crashes, engine blocks don't leave the car and then impale people. And the number of cars that manage to get up into the stands is astonishing,
I really, I mean, we've seen Death work through proxy, but I don't think we've ever seen Death, the Grim Reaper, work with this level of physical agency as we do in this sequence.
Right.
I mean, it is like there is an invisible man there, you know, throwing t-shirts into the air,
Right.
and you know, it feels like, you know, it feels manifested. It's not just pigeons or water and electricity mixing. This feels like, you know, there's an invisible race of death people who are laying waste to this racetrack.
But not just invisible, because in the first premonition, there's also like these moments where our lead character, who I'll just call Brunette Dude,
Right.
he, you know, there are moments where Brunette Dude looks up at the foundation of the actual racetrack and it's cracking. And that would be enough to get me to leave.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, if I saw the stone structure crumbling, I'd be like, hey, checking out. Fuck you guys. I'm gone.
Well, I mean, this movie just compounds the issue I have with this entire series, which is that, you know, everything can be explained through non-magical interventions. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like if this foundation is cracking, it's all over. You don't need death to help out.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's definitely, you know, it's another one that's completely on the fence between natural disaster and, you know, the Grim Reaper intervening. But
I would say through the fence based on the first scene.
very much so, very much so.
Yeah.
But you know, we do get the return of. It's interesting that, you know, David R. Ellis is back because his weapon of choice for death is a lot of long, sharp instruments.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the other characteristic is he likes a death to have a punchline. And we end the sequence on an anvil falling on someone, and then just a slight pause, and then a little twitching leg of the,
Well, I don't.
which I think is a great.
I think it's a tire, though, isn't it?
That one's the tire. Yeah, the bad CGI tire.
Yeah, yeah.
But there was both those things happen. But we
Right.
end this, you know, before this is a cold open, by the way, as if you needed to know.
As if you need, yeah, right. As if it wasn't plainly obvious that these movies are built on the biggest, most elaborate cold opens
Every
ever.
movie we have seen has conservatively 30 minutes worth of cold opens before we get into the movie.
Yeah, I know. Can I ask you one thing about this cold open that,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, it's a small thing for me, but there's this moment where Blonde Asshole has got binoculars, but the binoculars are filled with Jim Beam.
Yes.
They're a secret
Yes.
flask for booze. And
Mm-hmm.
a man and his girlfriend, the girlfriend is actually the one who gets it from the tire when they all escape.
That's right. Yeah. That's it.
But that man is... So when I first saw that couple,
Yeah.
I thought it was a father and daughter. That's how much older he is. That, like, she looks really young, much younger than she actually is. He looks as old as he is. Because I ended up checking the actors in real life, and one was, you know, over 40 and one was early 20s or something like that. But when I first saw it, I thought it was a father and daughter. And she said, hey, can I see your binoculars? And he goes, well, it's not really, blah, blah. And she just grabs it and starts drinking the booze. And one of my first notes was like, is the dad okay with her drinking? And does he even know that it's filled with booze? What's going? And then all of a sudden he's got his arm around her. I'm like, what is this relationship? And then it finally dawned on me that they're a couple.
Well, you know, given our earlier point about parents and children in this series, they could still conceivably be parent and child.
Yeah,
given how
right.
those relationships work in this series.
Oh,
that is,
man. Well, not just this series, but this movie specifically, too. Like, this movie is a whole different animal compared to the others.
Speaking of animals, how do you feel about I mean, I have a lot of opinions on this. Not all of them uh, are coherent. I'm still thinking about it. What do you think about introducing a white supremacist so early on in the movie?
Oh,
How do you feel about that?
here's my. I gotta find my. I said here's my note. I said, "Yikes, racism."
That pretty much covers all my thoughts. So
Yeah,
my first thought was, because I'm trying to put so this is 2009, right? Am I? Yeah. So I'm
right.
trying to put myself in that mindset. Whether I'm thinking, it basically what we have is an African American security guard, a neo-Nazi who says, "There goes the neighborhood" when he passes, and whistles Dixieland.
And whistling
Yeah.
Dixie. Yeah,
So that's the
exactly.
situation, and they've immediately established this character conflict as race-based.
Hmm.
So this is 2009. We have an African American president. There are people out there, even at the time, sort of saying that means America is post-racial.
Right.
So I
But
like
the
I like the
note.
fact that it speaks to the fact that yes, we have an African American president, but you could still go to any kind of sporting event and you would get, slapped across the face with a big piece of racism anywhere you go in America. That I like.
Well, and
That
that's
I
the
like that.
thing.
But what I really started to
I did
no,
not
what
like
I
it.
really started to object to as the movie went on was, what is the function to the story or the theme of making this a race-based conflict?
Right.
And
Because my note next to
if your
yikes.
net gain is that you feel like you can throw around the N-word brazenly and casually in a movie,
Hmm.
um, that's pretty harmful. There is no, you're basically you're putting racism out there, but you're not accounting for having it in your movie.
You exactly right. It makes it seem as though they're not accountable for it because the note that I have next to yikes racism is completely not necessary.
Yes.
Because the character who's a racist, the reason he wants to harm
Right.
the security guard, who by the way is McKelty Williamson, the one really great actor in this
Yeah,
movie.
and it's
He he wants to get him because he wouldn't let him go back inside to try to save his wife. Now, if that's the basis of hating this man, that's enough all on its own. You don't need racism.
100%, 100%. And much later on in the movie, we have another racial conflict between an old white man who is it's like an assisted living facility, or is it a hospital? It's a hospital, right?
Yes. Oh, I have a note.
And
Yeah.
a young Korean male nurse. And
How many of your kind I killed in Korea?
again, I thought,
I was.
I appreciate the fact that this is absolutely a confrontation that could conceivably happen at this point in history, and it's pointing out something that we're all painfully aware of now that some people might have been blinding themselves to at the time. However, where does it get us except to sort of have to sit through painful racist attacks on people with no story gain or no thematic gain? This is not a movie about racism.
Right, exactly. It made me like the note that I have after that is what's with David R. Ellis? Did he vote? Did he not vote for Obama?
But I mean, there's that sort of there's that kind of vicarious thrill of us like we've wrote something into the movie where we get to say the N-word or we get to be racist. Like that's the level I think it's working at.
Yeah, but your movie is the final destination. Like,
Oh,
what does this
I think it's abhorrent.
movie have to say about race? It's
But
yeah.
I think a lot of and you could even level this at people like Seth MacFarlane, or you sort of like, under this banner of it's okay because we show a white supremacist being, you know,
Being terrible.
yeah, well, and also we get to see him on fire being chased down the street, which, you know, I'm up for that in any movie.
Right.
And for the record, life. You want to do that on my street outside my house? I will, you know,
I'll pop my popcorn.
That's it. I'll give you the matches. I'll, you know, whatever. But I do think that's the sort of smokescreen, pun intended.
Yes, right.
A smokescreen for very irresponsible levels of
Filmmaking.
racism on screen.
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is a shame, as you alluded to, that it drowns not Mekhi Phifer. No, I'm being racist. It drains
Mykelti.
Williamson. I realize I said Williamson or Williamson. I'm just trying to resist the urge to call him Bubba because that makes me look like a racist. It drowns his part in something which is a kind of discourse that doesn't need to be there.
That doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, because he's got enough going on with the alcoholism and the killing his family.
Absolutely.
And the religious awakening and the
Completely.
day he spent trying to kill himself.
Right.
This guy's got an arc already. We don't need
we got a huge arc for that character, and we're going to get to that in the rest of this movie right after this, everybody. What a downer of a first segment. We'll talk more about this movie when we get back. Stay tuned right after this.
I like to think I know something about beer, but nowadays even I get overwhelmed when confronted by the exhaustive selection of craft beers they have at bars, breweries, and even grocery stores. Back in the day you had one, maybe two craft beers to choose from, and if you were confused, you ordered a Guinness. But in beerstinations like San Diego, the craft beer options lately are in double, sometimes even triple digits. So what's a beer drinker to do? You need what I need, the Vegas Beer Guys. Your beer of choice should be a perfect blend of malt and hops. And so a live show about beer needs that same balance. And the Vegas Beer Guys matches beer expert Dan Aker with self-proclaimed beer novice Stephen J. Weiss. The results are eminently drinkable. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. They'll try new beers, they'll tell you about beer. Think of them as your beer Sherpas guiding you up a foamy-headed mountain to reach the peak of your pint. God, I need a beer.
And we're back. Tom and I are here talking about the 2009 film, The Final Destination. When we last left, we were talking about piece of shit moms and piece of shit CGI and piece of shit racists. It was.
I'm gonna throw. I realize that when this movie is released, this will all be an either happily or sadly distant memory. But I'm gonna Mike Pence this and go back to talking about what we were talking about. The vice presidential debate was last night for anyone listening, for us at the time of recording, and Mike Pence like to answer the question he was asked by answering the previous question that was asked. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do the same, and because you mentioned piece of shit mom, and I think there's also a problem with a male character who says that's a lot of tampons for one woman.
Yeah, I have a note about that. Absolutely. I mean,
I just wanted to get it on record that, first of all, the amount of tampons she has is a perfectly appropriate amount of tampons for one
completely
woman.
And totally.
And I kind of want to know whether the screenwriter knows that.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they're talking about the ignorance of the character on screen, or whether this is just the screenwriter's ignorance of women's health issues.
Absolutely.
Anyway, let's move on. Susan.
Let's move on. Actually, well, I guess we are moving on. I was going to say we're going back in time, but for the course of the movie, I don't think so, because we have the cold open followed by, of course, opening credits. I want to talk about these opening credits because I think they're hysterical.
Me too.
Oh man, they just crack me up.
So, if I didn't know what I was watching, based solely on this title sequence, I would have thought that this was sports coverage.
Right. So for those that don't know, essentially the opening title sequence is a recap of every death that has happened in all of the movies via X-rays.
That is exactly what it is. There is no other
With
way
your sort of,
to put it.
it's like a kind of
it's
grunge metal along with it, right? The
grunge metal and like a kind of high. Again, the sporting analogy works because it's kind of like a highlight
Yeah.
package of all the best set pieces and death in the series so far. This won't be the last time we see one of these sequences,
No.
but it's certainly the worst execution of it that we see.
Absolutely.
I would say.
It's just kind of delightful, though, isn't it? In its stupidity.
Well, we haven't really talked too much about 3D yet, and I think like you, I didn't realize till very late on in the movie that this was originally released
I had forgotten
in 3D.
it when we were talking about it in the minisode,
Right.
in the ranking.
So I wasn't attributing any of this bullshit to 3D, but now I look back at it, I think, well,
Yeah.
of course. I mean that's sort of, I mean, it's not the only reason why it's an X-ray, but it's got to be a big reason that it's an X-ray and why things are flying towards the screen so
Shittily.
brazenly. Yeah.
But also, obviously we're going to talk about 5 in the next episode, but
Yeah.
for me,
Which is also 3D.
yes, and that's what I want to
But-
talk about, because in this one, I couldn't even remember when we were talking about it earlier that it was in 3D, and then as I started remembering,
Yeah.
because obviously when we're watching it at home, we don't get to see it in 3D,
That's
and so I had to
that's true.
I had to remember the stuff that I was seeing. I had to go back and look at my notes.
Yeah.
This movie feels like it's right a product of its time,
Absolutely.
2009, where they might have even said after the fact, hey, let's add some 3D. I think they did that with Clash of the Titans, where they didn't really film it in 3D and then converted it. And it had that feeling, whereas the 5th one feels much more purposeful. And I got to tell you, I fucking hate 3D.
Me too. Yeah.
But when I was
conceptually, I'm
watching-
against it, yeah.
Yeah.
But
But when I was watching 5, I thought, oh, I might have enjoyed this in 3D.
I 100% agree with you. I think it's like this feels like painting before perspective.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It feels like you I don't know. I mean, 3D's been around since the 50s, but I guess using it for digital cinema is a very new idea.
Mhm.
So you're at, this is 2009, right at that stage when we have 3D, but we don't know how to use it. And I feel like Final Destination 5 is subtler, more nuanced in its use of 3D. Just knows how to incorporate it better.
No, yeah, I think it's more they know how to incorporate it better.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same shtick of things are flying at the screen at you. Because that's really all you can do with 3D, which is one of the
Right.
biggest problems of it, is it all involves something coming towards you. Like,
But the manner in which they choose to do it in that movie is better.
Yeah.
The
I completely
woman
agree.
falling off the bridge and hitting the sail of a boat,
Yeah.
and that that point goes through her into our face. That's so much better than anything you see in this movie.
I agree, and yeah, I think if I certainly have big questions with this movie about how certain aspects of the movie would have worked in 3D, because it's actually very I once I realized this movie was shot in 3D, I had a lot of questions about, but how would that have ever worked in 3D? That was my
Right.
overriding feeling. Whereas with Final Destination 5, I was like, well, I could see how 3D would enhance one or two moments, but it's perfectly fine without it. Whereas, I mean, we're skipping way ahead, but this is the moment that's coming to mind. and this is a question that it might turn out to be a if a tree falls in the wood style Zen question for the
Right.
3D generation, but let me ask it anyway. Would the movie screen still be blurry in 3D?
Yes, that's one of my notes.
I honestly, like, every time I
thought
say
it was
that
this.
question out loud, I go into like a meditative state.
I just
I don't, because so, you know, basically for the listener, there is a scene in this movie which is a kind of a rip off of Scream 2, where the characters are watching in a movie theater watching a 3D.
They're watching Love Lays Dying.
Right, that's right.
That's the title of the movie.
And the image on the screen appears blurred, as if we're seeing it not with 3D glasses on, because the characters are watching with 3D glasses on. But if we were to watch this movie in 3D, what the fuck would be on the screen?
Yeah, exactly. Would it be blurry or not? That's all I want to know.
So for this reason and more, I think there is definitely a sense. I don't know if it was retrofitted or not. It seems to be. I'll give it this. It's certainly a discussion of 3D cinema is certainly built into the screenplay, which makes me think that maybe they always planned it to be in 3D and for it to be a kind of commercial for 3D. But because they talk about it so much to the point, and that's what tipped me off eventually. That this was, I thought I should check if this was a 3D movie or not, because they are talking a lot about 3D cinema in a movie which is about the Grim Reaper.
Yeah.
And indeed it was. So I think they wanted this to be a kind of showcase for 3D cinema, but it certainly it confuses the idea of what 3D is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It muddies the waters rather than making people think I want to go back and see another one of these. I would have just left thinking this doesn't quite work conceptually.
Yeah, I agree. All right.
So
there's that.
So this movie is technologically a misnomer.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, while we're talking about special effects,
or the lack thereof.
The lack thereof. And again, I feel it's the same thing. It's sort of like by 2011, I don't know what happened in those years, but filmmakers seem to have learned how to incorporate CGI into the film without it looking like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, or like a mixed cartoon. Like a mixed live action cartoon, which is what it looks like when it's used here.
It does. Yeah, absolutely. The fire.
And
anytime there's fire, anytime, you're just, you kind of, I don't know, your head goes into your palm and you just go, oh, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, this may be the peak of bad CGI fire in cinema.
Yeah.
But I was willing to give it a pass up to a point, because the most egregious CGI, like the most artificial looking CGI, was all in dream sequences. Because the main character's premonitions now come to him.
They're
in dreams.
always right. Yeah.
And I kind of thought,
well, that's another thing that's different about this movie. This idea of
it's a stupid idea.
The repeated premonition, where every death will be coming to him in a vision now. And that's what separates this movie from all the others, narratively, I guess.
Oh, I agree. So I was willing to give it a pass, but the problem is he woke up and said, it all seems so real. And I'm like, oh, fuck you. I was on your side. I was willing to pass this off as it is literally fantasy, so it doesn't need to look real. And then you're going around saying that how vivid it was. Fuck you.
Yeah, now you're giving me this shit.
It did not look like anything that would bother you emotionally. You would never be conned into thinking any of that was real.
It did not look real.
So
that's a bald-faced lie.
Yeah. So anyway, this movie is always the good of this movie is always stacked against a very flawed use of both 3D and CGI, which
And racism.
and sexism.
And yeah, the list goes on.
The list goes on. Yeah.
I'll say this for the movie though, like the racist died early on.
Well, yeah, and it's that. This is where at times I'm willing to give it a pass because I see, and especially knowing it's David R. Ellis and knowing that how adept he is as a director of comedy and irony.
By the way, you and I are working on. We've come up with this thesis that's not proven yet.
Well,
this is just what we believe in our heart of hearts, based on number 2.
Well,
what we think about David R. Ellis.
This is like a presidential or a vice presidential debate where we're talking about truths, the source of which is only us talking about it before this. But that's okay, because that's what this podcast is about. But
yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, there's very few things I can speak up for. I think that there's a salon sequence about midway through the movie where I think we get a lot of good pacing and editing and timing. It's very nicely done. It feels like it should be in one of the other movies, is what I'm saying. And it stands out in that sense.
Yeah. It stands out because it, like you said, it has the pacing of which you're kind of waiting for bated breath for the terrible thing that is going to happen, and you keep thinking it's going to happen and it doesn't. You know what I mean? It kind of carries you along on top of the wave in a way that does work well.
And it's a nice angle to that there's always got to be like and we start to see this as the series goes on. There's like a gateway idiot that Death works through, like someone who is either just the clumsiest, most unsafe person alive, or is like dangerously incompetent at what they're trying to do. And here we have, piece of shit tampon mom.
Yeah.
Who, just lets her children run riot. So again, there's every chance that this could end in mass death.
Well, because they ultimately are responsible for her death, because they're the ones that were throwing the rocks at the lawnmower guy and his signs that he was mowing around. And it's those rocks that the lawnmower ran over and kicked out that went through her eye socket.
This is what I mean about, this. It is an unanswered question, even at the end of Final Destination 5. How much can these deaths be explained behaviorally?
Right. Yeah.
How much can this person's character
play
for the fact that all these people die?
Absolutely. Well, let's
Where do you want to go?
Well, I get the next thought I had was, look, all of these movies, save the second one, I knew, the bulk of the cast are all people you don't know.
Right.
Right? But this one, to me, seems to have, beyond McKelty Williamson, who's great, the weakest actors. And I think that hurts this movie, too.
It does. I mean, they're very, very forgettable, certainly. I at some point I became interested in the character of Hunt.
Who's that?
His name is a rhyme for what he is. Replace the H with a C.
I was just gonna say.
Yeah, he's the jerk. He basically he's
blonde jerk.
Yeah. Is he? I can't remember if he's blonde. He definitely has some kind of spiky hair.
Yeah, that's him.
Yeah. So
he death by butt draining, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think he's very well played for the character he's playing. But what struck me about him is it almost made our job meaningless. Because his function in the movie is to offer snarky retorts to the things people say. Which is our job.
Yeah.
That's what this podcast is for. We're literally, we're literally useless. Because this guy, he says something snarky about every plot point that someone brings up.
Right.
Um,
Not just that, but one of my favorite lines to hate in this movie is when his best friend, and I don't know why he would be friends, why these people are friends with him at all, because the woman he's with at the racetrack is his ex-girlfriend.
Right.
And his best friend clearly has nothing in common with him. So I don't know why this guy is even allowed to hang out with their group. But at one point, his best friend says, I mean, do you ever think about being sensitive? And he says, I don't know. I never tried.
Yeah. He's kind of delightfully awful human being. And I think the biggest problem here is, if the rest of the cast was stronger, you'd want him to die first. But I just wanted him to live longest because he was the most interesting.
Oh, I don't know. I find him the least interesting. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean, he's a poor version of Isaac in Final Destination 5. They do that character much better the next time round.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
I like the fact that he was, snarkily undoing the more ludicrous aspects of the plot here with his comments, and it made it very difficult for me to think of snarky things to say about this movie because he says them all in his dialogue.
Because he says them all. Well, you've got a point there. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about the Final Destination. We're going to take one more break, and when we come back, we'll finish up talking about the least successful of the Final Destination. Stay tuned. Does the coronavirus have you feeling oogie? Have you been sitting on your couch for weeks? Nay, have you been sitting on there for months? Well, it's time for you to get back in shape. Check out 2AT Fitness. You can find them on Instagram. You can find them on Facebook. 2AT Fitness was started by Tina Bernard. She is ready and raring to go to help you get back into the shape you want to get into. They've got all kinds of classes. They've got outdoor in-person classes. They've got online classes if that's what you prefer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get back in shape. You're going to find a variety of exercises. You're going to have strength training, cardio, weightlifting, even fun 5-minute burnouts that will push you to your limits. So get off the couch, get into shape. Go ahead and check out 2AT Fitness. Tina Bernard has got you for all your needs. I know her personally. She's fantastic. You're not going to meet a better person to help you become the new you. Check it out. And we are back again, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I talking about the Final Destination, our least favorite of the destination movies. Oh, man. Well, we've been talking about political topics. We've been kind of chewing around the fat of this movie.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the shit that actually happens. What's your favorite death scene? We've got a racist being burned. We've got, rocks through eyes of shitty moms.
Mm.
The auto mechanic gets pushed through a fence, which I'm sure they thought was the most delightful piece of 3D filmmaking they were probably doing. They went full Quick and the Dead on that one.
Yeah. I probably the anvil, the tire that sounds like an anvil.
Mm-hmm.
That crushes that woman. I like that a lot. Just because it was suitably, it was like suitably cartoonish and slapstick.
Well, yeah, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Everybody in these movies dies like Wile E. Coyote.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So that's but yeah, definitely the deaths in the salon scene are very well executed.
Those are well executed. The most absurd one that probably is also strangely the most gleeful though is this guy, blonde asshole dying in the pool. To me is hysterically stupid.
Yes.
I mean, it's just, first of all, Is there such a thing as a lever on the side of your pool that says drain? Can pools just like can you just flip a switch and drain a pool?
You've already made the. I don't think they've thought beyond the Acme
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
the Acme version of this swimming pool that that you would have in a Roadrunner cartoon.
So essentially, listeners, if you haven't seen the movie, what happens is this blonde asshole, first of all, through his own happenstance, some kid squirts him with a water gun in the pool. So this shorts out his phone, so he can't get the message from his friend telling him don't go near water. And then he pops the kid's life raft to get the gun, throws it over a fence, and hits a lever that says drain pool, and
Yeah.
then manages to fall in said pool, and his butt gets sucked down to the plug,
Hmm.
and essentially, I guess it just turns him inside out, just sucks
Yeah.
him through the drain, and it's hysterically dumb. I
It
you
is,
know,
yeah, yeah. I mean, I found a lot. I found a lot of the deaths disappointing. We get a lot of the same old kind of shtick.
hmm
As this is the first time it started to kind of wear on me.
yeah, I
The,
agree.
the death was using the same three pieces of equipment to kill everyone.
Right.
There wasn't a great deal of variation, and I just felt a lot of the moments that were meant to be spectacular, and in Final Destination 2, the movie really pulls off these moments. The whole 3D movie theater explosion that you see multiple times.
Oh, so many times.
So you see it so many times, and I guess in their head they're thinking it ramps up the stakes because you see it again and again and again. But it's actually the opposite. It's like diminishing returns every time you see it.
Right. And let me ask you this, because we've talked already about how your lead character, brunette guy,
Hmm.
is having premonition throughout the whole movie.
Yeah.
And we talked in 48 Hours about the triple bluff. This movie has the biggest double bluff I've ever seen in my life. And that's part of the reason we're seeing this goddamn movie theater 73 times. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we have a huge second premonition, like the cold opens of all the movies, that happens again at the end of this movie. What's your
Well,
works or doesn't work for you?
it doesn't work, and yet in principle it should work. And I think when we talk about the final movie in the series, we'll see an example of it that definitely does work, which is also a triple bluff.
hmm
So it's definitely where the series should be going to keep the audience on its toes.
Yeah, it's funny that
But
you
here
say that.
we're kind of like, we're not, every time you sort of you're sort of triple bluffing, and I know gymnasts in the next film, but I'm going to use like a gymnastic comparison. It's a triple bluff that ends on a bluff.
Right.
It doesn't end on anything that we've not seen. Right?
Right.
It's just an example for like doubling the amount of gore or tripling the amount of gore, really.
Yeah, and it's funny because I feel exactly like you do that this is the place that where the series should go,
Yeah.
and yet I just found it tiresome. It just wasn't executed well.
And,
I think
and
you know what I
again,
think it was for me more than anything was in the premonition for this last scene.
Yeah.
He and his girlfriend are trying to escape, and they're on that escalator, and he's holding on to her,
Yeah.
and her legs start getting caught in the machinations of it starts chewing her up, and she's spitting up blood, which gets on her arm, which means he can't hold her anymore, and she falls in.
Right.
And I remember thinking, holy shit, like, if this guy survives, that's a terrible place. That's a terrible thing for him to have to remember for the rest of his life.
Mm-hmm.
And so dramatically, that was working for me. And then all of a sudden it cut out. And that's the moment where we start the whole scene over again. And I thought, oh, fuck.
Yeah, because the problem with it is it's anti, like it's you're just sort of deferring the moment. You're not doing anything to up the ante. You're just sort of putting off the inevitable.
Right.
And I think Final Destination 5, by this point in the series, we realize that we know the score.
Mm-hmm.
We know what's going to happen. We've even seen double premonitions before,
Yeah.
so that's not going to impress us. So it's like, where do you go from there? And this movie's answer is like, we just do it all over again.
Mm-hmm.
That's the trick. That's the limit of it. Where, I mean, we'll talk about it in the next episode, but we have something in Final Destination 5 which to me is genuinely surprising, but it's not but it's like, actually, it's a twist in that, it's trying to, it's like a bait and switch, whereas this is just like, it's just like, giving the audience the bait and then pulling it back and then giving it to them again and pulling it back.
right.
Basically, it doesn't, and you're absolutely right. Like, it just undoes all the interesting stuff that happens.
That happened, right?
It's a reset, and that is not very satisfying. Because I remember I said that the sort of the meta explosion in the 3D movie theater,
right?
It should, and I think in Scream 2 it does. It does, like, it doubles the anxiety and it doubles the stakes. The fact that you have this fictional representation of what you're seeing going on at the same time
as the real thing.
The real thing. Like in Wes Craven's hands, that really works.
That works. Yeah, right. Exactly.
But here it doesn't do anything except I guess complicate things in a way that's not very satisfying. I wonder if they're at the point where it's like 3D is such an incredible thing. They're still in that mindset of people are going to be so wowed by 3D that they're not going to know what they're looking at, and their mind is going to be blown.
Right.
But, I don't think that was true, but I think that's what they're thinking. And so they're not thinking about the finer points of, but if you take 3D out of this equation,
do you have anything?
And the answer
right.
The answer is just more of the same.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and say from a writing standpoint, because we've talked about this before in this series, we talked about like how long it takes for everybody to talk about the previous movies. And in this movie, it's 40 minutes in to a movie that's only 82 fucking minutes long, by the way. But
I kind of like the brevity of it. I feel like they got comfortable with they replaced Tony Todd with internet printouts.
Again.
And they kind of they keep the exposition to a minimum. They keep the movie moving. Hunt. It's the point where Hunt is saying all these sarcastic things about the movie's mythology and how it doesn't make sense. So I like the way that is handled. It doesn't weigh down the movie.
Yeah, but the other thing that happens in these movies that we've talked about was how long it takes the characters to believe. And I think this is the movie where it's the least successful. Like in 3, it was really successful that the jock was, not believing. But the other thing is like usually what happens is all those people die within a matter of seconds to a couple of minutes of somebody trying to convince them, you're in a lot of trouble. You need to believe me, right?
Yeah.
And in this movie, the main girl's best friend, the brunette, she almost gets decapitated in a car wash after being saved at a NASCAR race. So that's twice where premonitions have saved her life. And when they're at the movie theater at the end, she's like, I've got a bad feeling. We got to get out of here. She goes, oh, come on.
Yeah.
And I just think, your life's been saved twice. You might want to buy in at this fucking point.
The character is called Gina, I believe. And at one point, I felt like she was in her own little episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm. Yeah. She's talking to homeless guys. She's getting stuck in a car wash. I mean, all you need is the da-da-da-da-da, and you're there. Basically.
Well, you almost have that exact feeling between her giving change to that homeless man on the street and then the last scene in the movie where he's like, the homeless man reappears and he says, you're the guy who saved all those people at that movie theater, huh? He just bought a cup of coffee. And he walks out the door, and she's got a quizzical kind of, where do I know that guy from? Look on her face, you know?
Which again is, something
Just,
they did in Final Destination 2, the same thing. It's like, oh, it was staring us in the face the whole time, this incidental character
yeah.
who we barely notice holds the key to the mystery. And he comes back in the final scene and we go, oh, it was we were looking for the clues in the wrong place. Although we see a lot of coins rolling around.
Yeah, all the time.
And so I'm thinking, well, we should have probably picked up on that. But I think it's hilarious how they usual suspects the shit out of that reveal.
Mm-hmm.
In the coffee shop. They're kind of like, don't we have like a montage of all the things, all the clues that we should have noticed?
Sort of. It's like a repeat of an earlier scene where he's...
Oh, he looks around.
Yeah.
It's not a montage. He looks around the room, and everything they realize from everything that's in this room now was in the coffee shop now was in the premonition before.
Right.
They just got it wrong.
Yeah.
And it's got a very kind of Kaiser Soze, Dan Hedaya looking at the notice board feel about it.
Right. Yeah, totally.
So,
and then followed by, the X-rays are back.
The X-rays come back for the end of the movie,
showing how these three poor suckers die. It's just, I mean, again, it's kind of delightfully stupid, you know.
Yeah, and we, taking it all the way back to Jaws 3D again, we've got pieces of skeleton flying at us.
Mm-hmm.
Is something I don't know if that was I'm willing to believe that was a deliberate homage to the shark skull in.
You think
Jaws
so?
3D.
That's hysterical.
Well, knowing that it's David R. Ellis and knowing I think, but it's again this movie has an alarmingly strong record at doubling down on bad ideas.
Yes.
And having an X-ray based credit sequence at the beginning and the end of the film, there's no better example.
I tell you what I'm enjoying more than anything, just how much you are building up David R. Ellis in your mind as the genius of this series.
It's fascinating that from Final Destination 2 to what I will call Final Destination 4, even though that's not the title.
Right.
We basically it's an argument between two directors for the tone of these vision of the series. And,
yeah, absolutely.
But up until this point, both have kind of made their cases. And are almost, on a par, I think, for that both these visions of what this series should be works. But here, I think, it's just disappointing that Ellis drops the ball, really.
Right. If he had not dropped the ball on this movie so hard, I would call him the definitive champion. But you know what we haven't talked about, and I guess we can't talk about it because you haven't seen the original film, But
we can still talk about it.
But I got to tell you, I think all the sequels except this one are better than the original too.
Well, that's definitely the impression I get.
Yeah.
I feel like it's partly about how formula driven these movies are, but I don't get the sense that I'm missing anything significant that hasn't been covered in the sequels.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I've alluded to this before as well, like the material suits a sequel better than it might suit the first film in a series.
Yeah.
Because it's an inherently sequel-y idea to follow the survivor of a tragedy into the next phase of their story.
being followed by death itself,
Right, yeah.
as
So,
represented again by cold wind and
because it's like, I can imagine, having not seen Final Destination, that kind of early section of the movie, pre-accident, is almost its own movie. Because everything
Yeah.
after that changes, and it's all about the aftermath. Like, all these movies are about the aftermath of something.
right.
So probably, they work better as stories that are sequels. Although, as you quite rightly point out, they don't exploit that by
Right.
having continuing characters. They kill off, apart from Bloodworth, they who I don't think they planned on bringing back at any point, even though they
Right.
did.
But they did, right.
When Ali Garda gets it from the weird hook man. Oh, and speaking of the prosthetics collector, there's another character in this that was Final Destination 2 with the guy who has a box full of prosthetic arms.
Yeah.
And we made the point then that, you don't need to do anything with that for it to be any more
Creepy.
scary.
Yeah,
it's,
right.
It's all, the fact that this guy exists is the thing
Is
that's
the
scary
thing
about
that's
it.
frightening.
The toy demonstrator at the mall in this movie, who is flying those planes around.
Yeah.
I would not let that guy within, I don't know how much distance of my child.
Right. Your Honor, I'd like a 17 state.
Yeah, and that counts for his remote control plane as well.
As well, yeah.
I don't
completely.
want that. That's part of the problem.
Well, you heard it here first, everybody. Tom wants that guy the fuck away from his child. This is it for The Final Destination, the 2009 film. I don't have anything else to say about this movie, Tom. You?
No, not really. I just the line that almost saves this movie, with the actor who almost saves this movie, McKelty Williamson.
Thank you.
At one point he says, "I've been trying to kill myself all day."
Yeah.
And I think
I imagine him trying to say that as the actor, too. Like, I just want to get the fuck out of this movie.
it's kind of undone by the fact he's so irritated by the fact that he's put so much effort into trying to kill himself, but because the order of death is so rigid, you can't jump the line.
Heard.
But then later on in the movie, when he finds out that he's next in line, he says, "Oh, great, man!" Like, what? You can't do both.
Yeah.
Isn't this a relief to you now? You've been trying to... What did you think was going to happen all those times you were trying to kill yourself? But anyway, that line I think is great, and I wish there was more of that in the movie.
Agreed. We'll leave it there. Thank you. For Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions, I'm Mike Shantz from the How Dare You Awards. Coming up next, everybody, Final Destination 5, the true Final Destination. We'll see you then. Bye, Tom.
See you in 5.